It was the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, that triggered Libya's isolation and UN sanctions. Libya was blamed for the bomb that killed 270 people. It was one of the most infamous terrorist acts of that decade. To end the sanctions, Gheddafi will pay one of the biggest compensation packages of all time. A total of $10 billion to the victims' families.
Of the draft resolution
to the UN, he also had to admit responsibility for the actions of his officials. But to his domestic audience, Gheddafi is defiant. He said the money was not an admission of guilt, but just the price Libya had to pay for entry back into the world community.
ليبيا من هذه القوائم السوداء الثلاثة مقابلها بندفع كذا ندفع كذا ندفع كذا في 60 داهية ما يهمش المليارين ولا هنا ما هيش تعويض ولا حاجة بمقابل الامريكان قالوا هذه ليبيا اللي عملت هذا هنا بدي معروف من الرئيس هذاك الوقت معروف الرئيس اللي هو المجنون ريجن اللي مصاب بداء الزهايمر وفاقد عقله لا عنده الآن تو يمشي على يديه ورجليه وما يعرفش
But in his denial of responsibility for Lockerbie, Gheddafi has found an unlikely ally in Scotland. Professor Robert Black has campaigned for years to bring the Lockerbie perpetrators to justice. He was instrumental in setting up the trial under Scottish law in The Hague that in January 2001 convicted a Libyan intelligence agent.
Yes, it is a betrayal, I feel.
But now Professor Black thinks Abdelbasit al-Megrahi was wrongly convicted.
And it angers me that although the arrangement itself, the actual practicalities of the trial, worked perfectly, it's just that, in my view, the outcome was a wholly and utterly perverse verdict.
Professor Black says the main evidence against Megrahi was not only circumstantial, but not credible. It centres around the clothes in the suitcase that contained the bomb. It's alleged Megrahi brought them off a shopkeeper in Malta, thus connecting him to the attack.
The shopkeeper at no point ever said, that is the man who bought the clothes. The most that he would say is that that man resembles a lot the person who bought the clothes in my shop. And he had also, in his original statement to the police, the shopkeeper had given a description of the man who bought the clothes. That description was that the man was over 50 years old and that he was over 6 feet tall. Abdelbasit Megrahi, at the relevant date, was 36 years of age, and at that date, and still, he is 5 feet 8 inches tall. Nevertheless, on that evidence, the judges held that Abdelbasit Megrahi was the person who bought the clothes in the shop.
Many of the British victims' families agree with Professor Black that the verdict was unreliable.
I would like to see Libya allowed to come back in the community of nations.
To uncover the truth, the families are calling for a full public inquiry. Professor Black wants a retrial, and if that doesn't happen, he's prepared to quit the profession.
If our legal and judicial system is not strong enough to recognize that it has made a mistake and to take the appropriate action to rectify that mistake, then I'm afraid it is a system with which I do not wish to be connected.
I can tell you without any doubt that initially the understanding was that it was not Libya, but that it was Iran. Now, of course, I can't reveal to you the evidence I saw at that time, but there was evidence. It wasn't just speculation.
The international community is sending two clear signals. First, that
this time, it was not bombs, but international sanctions that were to hit Tripoli.
that is prepared to make concerted.
Libya was required to accept responsibility for the bombings and to turn in the agents responsible. Western diplomats believed that a drastic embargo would be enough to bring Gaddafi down. In 1993, Gaddafi celebrated his 24th year in power. The erstwhile revolutionary was now 50. Flanked by the few national leaders who were still willing to be seen with him, he pointed the finger at his old enemies, Britain, America, and France, to explain the position Libya now found itself in.
باعت نفسها هذا الشيطان واعتقدوا ان الشيطان سيبقى دائما، لكن نقول ان الشيطان سيهزم في النهايه وسينتحر الشيطان.
But for now, Gaddafi was the one in danger. He was a pariah, leader of a country that was cut off from the rest of the world by an embargo on air traffic and weapons sales, and above all, by a boycott of its oil, Libya's only source of revenue.
Gaddafi has always denied that Libya was responsible for Lockerbie, but he's desperate to end Libya's isolation. So desperate that he's willing to pay $10 billion US.
Even though we paid money for something that we did not commit, we are paying this to buy a license. Libya needs to be admitted into the world stage, to be looked into as a serious partner that people can do business.
The West wasn't looking for other trails in the obscure world of terrorist networks and secret services. It had the perfect fall guy in the blustering Colonel Gaddafi.